Beautiful. All right, two full starts in, back with Mr. Franzap. Excited to hear about all of his thinking, Nostr, Web of Trust, decentralized app stores, you name it. So, Fran, I'm excited because I think you first came across my radar. It must have been, I don't know, a year and a half ago when I read your essay. You were, I guess, the first software engineering cohort of Madeira, and you wrote a really beautiful essay on Stacker News talking about the need for a decentralized app store, Web of Trust. I think this was the first sort of set of explorations coming into Zapstore. Is that right?
Exactly. It's called Can Nostr Fix App Distribution or something like that, which is by Guy Swan on his pod, and he added some commentary. Yeah, it was quite a good one because that led me to the solution I wanted to see in the world, which
Mm-hmm.
then became Zapster. And basically, the article was previous to Madeira, which was about a year ago, like January to March.
Mm.
And there I started to develop and code the solution, which is Zapstore.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's been a year now. One would
time
expect to have
flies.
like so many more things done when you say, "Yeah, I got a year to do this," but life gets in your way. And other things come along that are super interesting. And I can say that I met so many great minds last year. And well, as you might have mentioned, I'm also starting this project with PWA called Vertex,
Mm-hmm.
and doing like Web of Trust services. And yeah, that's something that obviously always piqued my interest because part of the idea behind Zapstore, and now if you can have like, let's say, a decentralized app store, is the idea of being able to choose your own catalogs, so to speak. So like you're not fixed with the one of the vendor, but you can just mix and match. And
Yeah.
part of that is like, how do you know what is good? Uh, what is bad? Is an app discarded from a certain catalog because it is of bad quality, or because it's a scam, or because it's censored? And that's something that is completely subjective, and that's up to users to decide, not
Yeah.
really.
What's the latest for you now with Zapstore? Are you still primarily focused on getting the devs paid? Is it still Nostr focused primarily, or is that just kind of a nice add-on for any open source stuff that gives you this web of trust property?
Yeah, so what's coming up with Zapstore is basically twofold, because I'm working on clients on one side and on infrastructure on the other side, so relays. And on the client side, I want to see much more social integration. So all this idea of being able to see what people are recommending, if people are, for example, starring or bookmarking certain apps, recommending like even releases, then that this shows up, and it's like kind of a personalized experience for you on the store, if you wanted to. If you want to use it in a completely private way, that will always remain an option. And on the other hand, when I'm talking about relays, it means actually content, because at the moment I'm manually indexing apps, and yeah, the updates are automatic, but every time someone wants to see an app in the store, they need to ask me or send a PR to a repository that we have. And so it's a bit cumbersome. It's never going to scale this way. So one of the things I'm developing right now is this new set of relays. So Zapster will have its own relay where devs will get whitelisted as they do now. Like the policy is like, if you're a developer who is, for example, on Nostr and wants to sign your app, like Nostr sign your app and publish it, then you come to me and I know you, and then basically the policy, if you get vetted, then you can publish any kind of updates of those apps. They don't get like approved every single time. But what I want to do is separate the apps that are not signed by Nostr devs, or developers, let's say, that have an account on Nostr, but all those like apps that come from GitHub, from GitLab, from F-Droid, and so on, like other sources, right? So if you wanna get an APK that you know is on GitHub, a lot of people use other apps for this. then instead of having to ask me, you'll be able to type into the UI, you're going to type this certain app, and this is going to hit our relay first, a specialized relay that's going to, in the backend, communicate with GitHub and check if that app is available, which apps with that search term are available, and then go and check if there are specific packages, APKs for this result, right? So still figuring out 100% how it's going to work on the technical side, but that's the idea. So have some sort of proxy where, yeah, you still use a Nostr relay, but it's essentially just going out to the internet and trying to find stuff. And then once that's set up, you start getting like when people basically install one of these apps, then they get automatic updates, not just for them, but for everybody.
Cool. Yeah, and I remember that was always something I really liked about your vision was that, obviously you've got a Nostr community and, hopefully people get interested in signing with Nostr keys to be able to verify it's them and build this reputation. But you were always targeting, open source far beyond just Nostr. Have you seen examples yet of, either uptake from Nostr users into open source software they may not have known about because they found it on Zapstore and or some of these other open source devs that get interested in signing or figuring out what are Nostr keys so that they can build reputation in your app store?
Yeah, at the moment it's mostly within the Nostr ecosystem. I don't think and that's again one of the plans for Zapstore is just kind of getting out of the circle, right, and try to expand the idea beyond. So then in this way we can bring more devs to, even without pushing it on their face, like right, you get an account quote unquote on Zapstore, and then ultimately you have an NSEC that you can later on use. And we got to see about the payment stuff, because one of the ideas is, and one of the things I entered actually first days of this year, it was zapping, right? So that you connect via Nostr Wallet Connect. If you are a dev who has a Lightning address, then you can receive payments.
That's awesome.
For your app. And it's not massive yet because there are just a handful of apps. I mean, maybe more than a handful, around 20 or so.
Cool.
But I've been quite surprised to see the amounts that people are zapping on there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What are the largest apps so far, and is it coming in
crazy,
sort of a value for value, or?
Yeah, it's absolutely value for value, which is one of the models I want to pursue. But I also want to do upfront payments or subscriptions or all kinds of monetization schemes, because I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think value for value will be able to sustain a dev or a musician, or, I mean, who knows? Maybe basking is the ultimate solution to monetization, but I don't think so. So right now it's working that way. In terms of amounts, I don't know, but I was at, for example, 21,000 sats, for example, which,
That's pretty big.
It's a good one. I would have to pull some data and check the stats to see, like, from the beginning of the year, like how many sats have gone through Zapstore. That would be interesting thing to show.
Yeah, I think it would also be interesting to know how many individuals apps. And I know you don't do a ton of tracking, which is great, but I'd be curious to know also early on, like what percentage of users are zapping. And so, obviously this is like a particular very, very like Bitcoin Nostr focused initial group, but, I'd be curious, is it sort of the 1% rule? And maybe now it's much closer to like 10 or 20%. But, my guess is it's the kind of thing where whether or not you do paywalls or busking, the larger your top of the funnel, obviously the more you're going to get. And, maybe with 100 users, you're only getting 10 zaps, but, with 10,000 users, all of a sudden, if you can maintain a 1 to 10% zap ratio, okay, well, now it starts to get kind of interesting. And especially if you have a popular open source project, that could start to become real money.
Absolutely. Yeah, that could be. This experiment is super small, so maybe, I don't know, projections might work or they might not work. I don't know how psychology works on the level, right? If you have some project might have 1 million users, but then the percentage of people who are zapping, giving value for value, is much less than those who are now, because those who are now are much more hardcore. So it's difficult to say. But in
Yeah,
any case, it's good to give devs the option to choose what they want. You could have a paywall and value for value, or
totally.
have value for on specific features or releases or feature prioritization. And there's a bunch of things that can be done when we have this open permissionless way of just playing around with the tools and see what sticks.
Totally. Yeah. There was a developer, I'm forgetting his name right now, but DK is actually friends with him here in SF. And I know Stu is a big fan of his, but some years ago, now he has Socket, I believe, which is like a open source. It's a company that helps vet open source projects and dependencies for bigger companies to use, which is a pretty interesting way for them to monetize. But early on, he always had a lot of ideas around basically how do we get you know, people that are building small things like packages, but maybe they get huge distribution and like Adobe's using it and whatever GitHub is using, all these companies. How do they get a small revenue share? And I remember reading those essays of his, and it was like, there's so many cases where I've read an essay and be like, man, like if only they knew that like the Lightning Network existed or Nostr existed, that this would be the perfect sort of set of solutions for them. How do you think about that? Like, split payments. So imagine if you're using app and that app has 100 different dependencies, and if each of those dependencies were zapped, whatever 1% of the total waterfall of sats, then all of a sudden, people that are doing pretty low level but high impact, high distribution work, maybe they're the ones that become the real winners. Have you thought at all about or tried any of those waterfall zaps where you can split them between projects?
I didn't think much about that. It sounds amazing, but I don't know how it will work out in practice, because ultimately you are giving, if you're talking about like open source dependencies, like
Hmm.
lower level libraries,
Yeah,
you are still donating, right?
totally.
You can still use them without paying. So I don't know how that will work out. Now that you mentioned Lightning, I also don't know if that's going to be possible to do this kind of like massive waterfall zaps, um, or prisms, someone call them,
Prisms, that's right. Yeah.
right? And I don't know. I feel like Lightning it's great. It's great when it works. It does have limitations, right?
Of course.
That's one of the reasons why people are exploring the whole eCash approach, because it is a way to get like way faster payments. I feel even today when I zap, sometimes gotta wait 5 to 10 seconds. If you want to make a huge payment with a Prism, that probably becomes impossible. There's gonna be so many failures along the way
Right.
that is gonna have to take some form of custodial. As sad as that may be, I feel like that has to be the way, but that's fine. We're not
Yeah.
talking about huge amounts, so doesn't.
Totally. And to be clear, I mean, if you did something like eCash, you could still give like a lightning address, right? So that it could convert into sats if that's what you wanted to hold the last minute, or not, or you just get an eCash wallet and, stack your dollars or custodial sats and, so be it.
Exactly. You can not only just segregate by amount, but also by time of holding, right? That's another dimension to it,
Yep.
where you could say, sure, I have no problem holding this for the transaction. Let's do eCash, but then, you know, pay me out. So I don't want to keep my cash for weeks or months on this mint, but I now request that you send it after the payment, or in batches, daily or something like that.
Yeah.
So we got to see what's the best combination to do all those things. But again, coming back to incentives, um, we have to see what happens. But it's going to be up to basically the how do you call, the developers that are more on the front line, so the ones who interface directly with customers, that receive the money and then maybe pay out to, or donate, back to the whole like chain of dependencies.
Right.
Um, Maybe if it's automated and the amounts are reasonable, like it does work at a large scale. But again,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for me to say right now.
Well, and I guess this gets to one of my questions as you think about who you're focusing on as sort of the end zap or the end consumer. Even if, it is a busking model, obviously for that to work, you have to have a really large top of the funnel. And, even with paywalls, probably the same thing. And so one question I thought about here is, you're kind of focused at least now with the idea of an app store on the end user app. I've always wondered though, if something like this maybe would go, especially some of these low level dependencies, um, the probably the place to do that. Maybe the end user is doing a zap, and maybe the zat's whatever 1,000 sats, and that gets split along the waterfall. But the sort of decision to pay the different dependencies along the way, I'm guessing is happening in a different kind of environment. Maybe it's something like GitHub. Like I thought to myself, like how nice would it be if every GitHub user just had like a native Lightning address, or they just opted in and said, hey, whatever piece of code, I've uploaded a Lightning address with this specific library as well, and you can choose to check a box and like include me in splits or not. That probably, I'm guessing, is where that like waterfall dynamic would come from. And maybe there's a chance to do that in Nostr. I know there's, for a year and a half now, people have been talking about building, decentralized alternatives to GitHub. Maybe that's the place where something like these waterfall payments would actually, or at least the decision to make waterfalls. Maybe the end user from Zapstore is still who's actually, making the payment. But the waterfall gets included at the GitHub stage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need to kind of go back chain and where you include it. I think the Albi guys had put out a project or an extension to add this not to the GitHub repositories, but the NPM for like
Oh yeah,
JavaScript.
that's a great idea.
I don't know how it's called.
Zap package, I remember this.
That package. All right, and there
I
was the
think so.
Lightning press. So there's so many things to build yet, and I don't know what's the state of the Git, the whole like decentralized Git thing. I mean GitHub, because the Git is fine as it is.
Yeah.
I guess it was the whole like social layer around repositories that was being
Hmm.
worked on. Um, I haven't checked on the guys. I know people who are working on it because obviously there's like this this boundary where this touches Zapstore, right? Because Zapstore ultimately is doing the packages, but these come from source and ideally, and that's something I also want to work on, is like services which might take the form of DVMs for example, checking reproducible builds, right? So you say this certain commit of this source code is the one that's being used to build this package, right? Is a way of linking, like cryptographically linking um, a package that the user is going to install to a certain state of the code base.
Yep.
And it's not trivial to do. Right now, you're basically trusting that the developer, well, for example, on Zapstore, if you already have the package being signed by a developer, if he's also committing to that repository, well, then you're just trusting this dev, but you don't know maybe if there was some sort of like malware injected at some point in the build process. A lot of things can potentially happen that you cannot easily verify that. So reproducible builds is a way that independent, like third-party services can grab the source code, get the specific commit, build it, and check that the hash of the resulting package is matches with what is being published.
Yep.
So that's one of the, well, not every project supports reproducible builds because there are a few things that need to get right for that to succeed. But I think that is the way. That is the way.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just love the model of getting one artifact per project, like per app. Let's say in Android it's an APK, right? When you produce an app, you produce just one output. If you move on to like other, let's say on Linux or Mac OS, like the package managers like Homebrew or APT, like a lot of them are just downloading some of them download binaries, but they also download sources and compile it locally. I'm a big fan of just like let the dev just get out this one artifact, is because right now we do on the internet, on the state of things in the world, we do have the bandwidth to just send these packages, and they're just much more easy to verify, and just much faster to basically just follow the Android model. And for example, languages like Golang have popularized this approach of like just you get one executable with all the dependencies in it. Yeah, sure. Since you're statically putting everything together, then you have like bigger downloads, so to speak. But
Right.
it just simplifies so much more the distribution, and we can basically apply the whole like Android model of like verifying the build now to basically any other operating system.
Cool. Yeah. How is your thinking around different operating systems? How has that evolved? I mean, I know, obviously the reason you start with Android is because it's much easier to get started on an open source operating system than with iOS and the sort of gatekeeper that they've become. Have you, thought any more about your sort of longer term plans? Is it still going to be focused on Android? Is there a new path to iOS? I know one path that we had discussed a while ago was making it really focus on progressive web apps, PWAs. For whatever reason, PWAs have not gotten huge, but in theory, I've seen a few different people take the approaches of like, well, you can have a PWA itself that is a PWA app store within iOS. Is that still a path you think has some promise for Apple users, or is that sort of a lost cause right now?
Yeah, I haven't made
Loaded
since I
question, but
but I'm not. I don't know, man. I love the principle of progressive web apps. It's great in theory, but
right.
I just don't see it working. It's because the main, I mean, we're mostly talking about mobile phones, right? That's kind of the goal for PWAs, I guess. It's like they could work in any environment, but it's mostly around like, how do we get onto iOS? That's kind of the big question.
Yep, always.
But as long as Apple and let's say Google, who mostly directs Android, don't want to make that like a first class primitive to basically install and treat progressive web apps as just any other app, that's going to be very hard.
Yeah.
Because what do you need to do in order to install a progressive web app? You need to tap around a few places, right? You need to know what you're doing. Like, I don't know how it's called on iOS currently. I haven't been using it for a while, but it used to be something like add to home screen, but you
Yep.
need
I
to
think it
have
still
like,
is.
mhm. They don't, these apps don't appear like in a catalog. Like, of course, you could build your own like PWA app store, which absolutely could be a thing. But then, there's this whole thing about particular releases, and I was talking about reproducible builds um, and just getting out like specific artifacts for a specific app and reason. It's like you can run checks on those. You can run like malware checks. You know you're certain with an app that you're running release 3.2.1. But with web apps, that's a bit more muddy, so you don't really know exactly what you're running when you're doing that, because it's just pulling stuff from it's loading probably the whole like app from the server. Parts of them are cached offline. um yeah, I'm not super familiar if there's a way for progressive web apps to have like specific versions to which you can apply all of these properties that you can with
Right.
native.
So I just had a bit of a potential eureka moment here, which I didn't even prepare this, but
Tell me
I'm
about it.
thinking, yeah, as I'm thinking out loud, it's perhaps something interesting for you to consider. So, I mean, we did obviously mention we're going to talk a little bit about AI, and I intend to go deeper there with you. However, it struck me that, it's always the big challenge with building like a competitive open version of an app store. I mean, yes, you can get the Android users, and yes, that's the majority of people, but the majority of money is obviously still in Apple, and that's sadly there just hasn't been like a big sort of easy path through. And the progressive web app is you're putzing around. It's just, at your point, it's not easy. You have to be extremely technically sophisticated, and even then, you're like, I don't know, it's just why. However, The chance to build a new marketplace or a new app store that can actually get real adoption. It seems like the best time to do this is always when you have a new computing wave or a new computing paradigm, when there is no incumbent yet because it doesn't exist yet. And one area that I've been looking into a lot more is, how you can, basically the biggest users of software by far, I think, are going to be agents. I think it's going to be much, 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 much bigger than humans. If there's 8 billion humans, there's going to be trillions, 8 trillion plus agents that are out there doing things. And so I know there's some heat and Nostr around MCP servers, which MCP servers have become the easy way for any app, I guess, to hook into a simplified API that your agent of choice, like Goose or Anthropic, directly using their model, can hook into. And I know there are some people, MCP is getting massive traction in, let's say, mainstream tech world. You're seeing, Block is obviously making a big bet on this. Anthropic created it. Tons of different companies are running their own servers, including Coggy, which is now playing a bit with Nostr as well. And I've seen some developers, Guzis or Guzzes, or however you say that guy's name, and some other guys are looking at the MCP DVM bridge. So you could have every DVM run as an MCP. And then it just hit me right now, instead of building an app store, why not just build the app store for agents, like an actual open, basically MCP store? So anyone that wants to build any app that needs to run, and maybe MCP doesn't end up working, but whatever server to make it easily communicate with an agent. If our new computer interface, like I'm thinking more and more about it, and the way I hope things go is I don't have to sit there and putz around with my phone. I hate the phone anyway, or even my computer. If I can just talk to my always on, maybe it's Goose, maybe it's some open source agent, hopefully running locally on my phone, and they need to go out there and get 10,000 different apps, but it's not an app. They're just looking for, the bot API, let's call it, or the MCP server. That seems to me like a real opportunity to just build from the ground up and not get blocked by Apple or anyone. Have you thought about this, or where's your mind going live?
Well, too many things there. The name of the guy is Jesus, by the way.
Jesus. Oh, yeah, it's Jesus.
Exactly.
He definitely spelled it differently name.
Yeah. I think he mentioned he was working on that stuff. I don't know what the status is, but yeah, it would be amazing to have this bridge from MCP to DVMs or whatever, like some Nostr based services. I recently started using Goose that I hooked up to some APIs to try to see if I could, they could make a difference in my like day-to-day development. And well, I've been using Cloud 3.7, which just ruined me financially because one day you're using that stuff and it was like so expensive. I think because the agent is like reusing a lot of context and like sending back, so they use like a bunch of tokens. Tokens, is it? What's the word?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of data going into it because you just keep adding the content, and it gets more and more expensive. But we can talk also about like local models and the developments that are going on for local models, but keeping it just in general, like AI. You mentioned in the beginning in my article that I went into a bunch of stuff that can also fix app distribution. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned by the end of it, I mentioned, that AI eventually will be a thing that will be able to assist and or on their own build applications.
Right.
And I kept this idea for a long time because I still feel a bit futuristic and I want to like add it to the experience of the already known app store.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really want to explore this, what I call like inverting a bit the dynamic of a marketplace, because normally the way it works is like you have supply and you get the demand, so you get the users going and checking out what's available. If you cannot find an app there, it's like, well, just I guess too bad, right?
Right.
You can send feedback through other channels, and hopefully you get someone to, or you just go and build it yourself, or you hire someone on whatever it may be, some agency or on Fiverr. But talking about Fiverr and what's the other one, like Workana or these kind of places where you might go and get freelancers to build an app or website. Like, I don't know if that has evolved much, if people there are being assisted by LLMs and such. But it would be amazing if, like, instead of going through all those hoops, like in your app store directly, you could, as you were mentioning, you could even talk to it and say, I need an app that does this, this, and that. Just build it for me, and you
Right.
get this whole, like, even layer of Nostr reputation for these builders. That,
Yes.
hey, this is a builder that produces like pretty good apps. Like, they have done this and they have done that. So whether that is completely automated or it's just a person that is being like, I think you had coined a term. It was not AI, it was IA, right? You told me about this.
Oh,
It's
well, I didn't coin that, but I think I jacked that from Ryan Ramelli. Yeah, yeah. Intelligence amplification.
right. Yeah, exactly. So either way, it doesn't matter. And I still kind of on the camp of IA because
Mm,
of my own experience. I think things are getting much better, but I still not at the point where I can just let the AI just like do my project because I
totally.
feel they would just make a huge mess. I need to kind of
Yeah.
be uh, so that's why I love the agents and specifically, well, Goose, but there's like what are the other ones? Windsurf.
Yeah.
And what's the other one? There's a bunch.
Cursor, I guess, sort
A
of, but
cursor, exactly. So
yeah.
I love this iterative process where they are assisting you in the stuff that is like kind of obvious and time consuming, but they're not just taking over. Because if you
Hmm.
don't still don't have your whole project like you're not aware of things, then it can take just some, who knows, some random directions because they still kind of hallucinate sometimes, or they just take weird decisions that you know why they were made. So it will get much better. It has gotten much better,
Right.
but I still feel like there's got to be some human involvement and direction. It's also because you need to input like values. So what do you think is important for the project that you might tell the AI to do, but I don't know how that's interpreted. You also need to get very good at prompting.
Hmm.
I'm trying to do that better. I'm trying to be like way more verbose and detailed and try to go into the nuance of like the little things and I got much better results.
Yeah. This is why you're starting a podcast.
But yeah, you mentioned that I started a podcast, but I don't think I can consider I started a podcast when I only put out like one episode. Did you
I
say?
listened to it. It was good, but you have it very underground. You can't listen to it on RSS. You got to get a Blossom blog. So
Oh, you got it, awesome. Yeah, yeah. Which,
but
sorry,
to
by
be
the
clear,
way,
yeah,
I'm interested if there's like, I want a service that I can just like pay Lightning
yeah,
and it gets me the whole podcast thing, distributed, whatever it is. I haven't really
totally.
been able to find it.
Well, there's a couple that will do hosting. I don't know if Oscar does hosting yet for podcasts. I mean, obviously, Fountain is obviously the big sort of
Yeah.
Bitcoin enabled listening app, but he may have hosting services. Wavelake also has hosting services for podcasters. You can do it
Mm,
yourself on Podcast Index 2.0, but obviously then you're like, again, like with all technical
no,
things, messing around with stuff, it's just a pain in the
no, I
ass.
would just want to
So,
upload the MP3. That's it.
yeah, totally. I would say either if Fountain has the creator tools live right now, do that. If or Wavelakes, those are probably the two easiest ways to get started. I don't know if they're on Nostr, but one of the guys at Pleb Lab has an AI service. Pull that up, Jamie.ai, which is a great name, and I think they're basically trying to do like various AI podcast services. And so the idea is that you just whatever pay per service. But again, all of these different. So I think there's almost two or maybe three different ideas that are coming out of this. One of these ideas is, I guess, the core thing that was trying to get across with the MCP server piece is that maybe the form factor of the application is changing. Whereas in the past, it used to be a thing that you needed to go to an app store and vet and download. I'm saying that maybe all of those app stores will like die or become like really unimportant because the computer user interface is no longer me like fucking with my thumbs. Instead, it's just me talking to my agent, which then the agent goes out there and finds the necessary apps or tools, but it's like a new form factor. It's no longer like like apps will be very passe or maybe disposable. Maybe you create one on demand when a human needs to use it, but it's, the percentage of usage that comes from the human versus the bot is so low that the native form factor is whatever API standard wins. So if it's the MCP server or whatever. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is I think that maybe the really huge business opportunity, which is also good for you and for anyone building in the open because no one's got a monopoly yet because it doesn't exist yet, is like an app store for MCP servers. So, or whatever ends up winning. So literally it's just like if the consumer is not the human, but the bot, and the bot is literally going to have a budget set by the human. And this is some of the stuff that if you've seen Jordy's work with FewSats and a few other people are playing with similar ideas, but it's like, I literally just like my agent has a budget of $100 and as long as it's under $100, it knows just don't bother me. And it just goes out there and finds the tools, the data, whatever it needs. What someone needs to build there is that marketplace or registry of all of these services that agent can go and pull either for free or pay for. And that could include stuff like the Nostr DVMs that are also running the MCP servers, or, for example, services like Kagi, the search service, for the human that's bundled as a $10 per month subscription, but they're also running an MCP server. So you could imagine, in fact, this is probably where like the pay per use stuff will actually take off. Probably not with humans is my guess. But if they say, hey, for humans, you have the subscription service, but if a bot needs a specific search and we're like the best place to get that query solved, and you can fill it for 10 sats or whatever, a penny, and all they need to do is just hit this endpoint on our server, then all of a sudden, whoever builds that giant directory for the AIs, I think that could be a really big opportunity. So that's one set of opportunities. The other set is this idea that you're talking about, which I also think is very beautiful, where you as sort of the demand aggregator, whether it's through the App Store or through your bot you're talking to, knows here's the kind of app I want to get built. And it's the IA thing, which is, people that are using Replit. I think Replit's in a great position to do this or whatever. That they kind of like they're AI supercharged. They're using various bot armies, but they're like still the final director, tastemaker. Maybe they have to code the final 5%, whatever. That's also great. So I think both of those are very, very promising business directions.
Yeah, totally. But I think the latter would be something that I see happening first, because I love the whole MCP store and so on. But first of all, like this can be used for just not apps, but for anything,
Right.
really. And
Data
then
sources too.
yeah. In terms of which form it takes, absolutely. Maybe the App Store of the future is, as you say, is not an interface as we know it right now, but you're gonna just talk to a daemon running on your computer, right? It's just gonna be talking about I want this, and then let's see how things evolve. Because again, as I was saying before, I'm not too confident at the moment that something can just like build the perfect app. And there's a lot of value too in let's say a company that has a product, has a team, has a direction that gets like augmented by all these tools, but they just keep it in check, and they just know they understand the problem better, which they can also use AI to understand the problem, that for which there is demand. But I don't know, like I feel that's at least at the moment or in the near future, that's going to bring better results than just like having this agent that's gonna go through the internet and just build you your magic perfect application.
Right. Yeah, I
Let's
agree.
see how that evolves.
One other kind of potential starting point for this was, we talked about the DVM MCP bridge. Jesus is building. However, you know, I've always wondered, DVM's obviously been around for a while, or Pablo talked about them, I guess, first a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. And for the longest time, it was cool, but it was kind of theoretical. I didn't know anyone that was actually using DVMs. And then I saw, I think it's Dusty has like a DVM dash or something. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm gonna pull it up right now. But
What's the
it
URL?
showed, I'm looking for it right now. It's a DVM dash, I believe.
Mhm.
Something.io maybe. I'll look for it right now. Um, Basically, I remember seeing that it started getting some dvm live. There you go. And then you can go and there's like a stats section. But it's kind of interesting to me because for the longest time I thought this was a cool theoretical construct, but no one was actually using it. And then I noticed on his dashboard in the last, I think, 2 months, we've started to see like a meaningful spike in activity. As an example, I'm just looking at if you look at like the cumulative uh, job count or even actor count. I mean, I think on February 10th we were at like 3,693 jobs, and today we're at 402,000 jobs. Like a little bit after a month later, so roughly 1 month, you saw a couple 100,000 jobs. I don't know if this is because Primal launched the DVM marketplace and people are using the algorithm, but that was a while ago. So I don't know what's happening, but it does seem like DVMs are starting to have a bit of a moment. I don't know if you have any idea why, but figuring out some way to even like whoever's going to build the marketplace for DVMs, that also seems like a pretty promising starting point too.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. Maybe I'm just focused on other things and I haven't noticed like there's people have been talking more about DVMs or
Me
what's
neither.
happened. But in any case,
Something happened.
I just have this. I mean, it's what people were mentioning about like users or zaps, and now you mentioned DVM usage, but I see it in the same lens. I wonder how much of this is actually real, or
Yeah.
genuine. Can you just distribute by unique users, for example, or it's just like one guy that is just hammering one TVM, or is just people that are I don't know just playing around with stuff, and are there payments involved or not? So I guess my
Yeah.
point is like I just want to apply web of trust to everything, you
Totally.
know, and
Well,
see like
let's let,
are these people are reputable pub keys using these
totally.
reputable, let's put like an asterisk on there, and then we can define it, but for now like just reputable pub keys that are making payments, then we're talking.
Totally. So let's maybe transition a bit. So, we've talked about your essay a few times. Maybe high level, could you explain why one, web of trust is so important, and two, why Nostr is the right substrate to build a web of trust? Maybe as an addendum to that, would you consider it fair to say Nostr is kind of fulfilling the PGP, the original cypherpunk PGP vision of everyone having public-private keys and building from that?
Yeah, like Matt Odell likes to say, we're bootstrapping the web of trust by shitposting. That's reality. It's like
Yeah.
it's essentially the PGP original web of trust was a social network, but in the underground, in the
Mhm.
shadows, right? It's like, yeah, there were links between people, but they were like kind of hidden, and people were vouching for stuff they were not really sure about. So the fact that Nostr allows it to have it in the open, and by the way, yeah, Nostr seems like a perfect substrate. I'm not close to other, real good approaches. Are there other protocols? Why not?
Yeah.
If they're good, they somehow need to be interoperable. So
Right.
if they're open enough, I don't mind. Let's have 10 of them.
Mhm.
The problem is like those like pseudo open protocols, which not don't don't allow for like real interaction between them. So so far it seems that Nostr is the best. And what was your first question?
Yeah. The first question is just why is a web of trust important in the first
What's
place?
important?
Like, yeah, what can you solve with it?
Well, just as we're talking about open protocols, we know that anyone can participate, including
Mhm.
bots. So you have no limit, and you cannot really censor. Um, you don't have any centralized choke point to like control, this influx of whoever want to create bots. Um, I should say not necessarily bots, but maybe spam,
Mhm.
because you could have real humans or bots, like both providing value or providing noise. So yeah, whatever that may be, but if they're just low value, you need a way to be able to discern between, what's signal to you and what's noise to you. And again,
Right.
that tying it to, the reputable definition and something that's good for you, it all ties to, well, how do you see the network? Like you see the network from your own lens, right? There's no one truth. There's not even one a global state on Nostr. Like you can approximate the global state, but you never have the complete global state. So that's why it's very important to have tools to essentially, you could say, put a number, but mostly I say like ordering, like prioritizing. It's more, the numbers just serve for that. It's not. There was a few months ago, I think, when Carlbot from Coracle had included some numbers and like next to profiles about web of trust. Like people were saying, "Oh, this is like a social credit score and all that stuff." It seems like now people have numbers on them, but the problem is when it's top down, right? That's what we're against. We're not against like putting numbers. It's insignificant. It's also relative to what your view of the network is anyway. So, I mean, one of the tools that we have for this is global. It's PageRank. Is the original algorithm that Google used to have to just basically getting the probability of just randomly getting onto a certain website. Like, if you just follow the links on the internet, like what are the odds of like you stumbling on a certain site? So I don't know, yahoo.com, whatever that was. And that would give you like a bigger probability, and that's what PageRank is. So if you just instead of having this graph of websites, well, you apply it to Nostr profiles, then that's what we call web of trust. But we can get into discussion if you really by following someone you trust, but it's a proxy to it, but it kind of works.
Right. So it's not the only proxy. You could use lots of things, right? Like, oh, this person zapped this person as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can weight up or down a certain connection depending on the interaction between these two pub keys, for example. But there's no, in terms of like primitive to signal like trust, like from A to B, like that's the only thing we have. We just have follow lists.
Yeah,
we could have something else that says, I trust this person. We have discussed it like a lot on the NIPS repository, about like what's the best way. And there's so many opinions that you got like eternal bike shedding on the NIP repo. So it's like sometimes it just gets tiring. Probably the best way to go about it is like just build something, and then once you build it, and that's what we did with Vertex in particular. Let's build something. Let's make it work, and then let's try to make it like let's try to make it interoperable and having all these specs that probably gonna get would make sense for other devs. Like we don't want to make like our complete own thing. Like we've been constantly thinking about this, but ultimately you will never agree with everyone, and that's what ultimately ends happening. So I guess it's proof of work, man. It's like if you get it done and it works and people adopt it, well, I guess that's gonna be the standard.
Yeah, and if someone doesn't like the standard, they can always fork it or retweak it and have their own parameters in there. And to be clear, I mean, with Web of Trust, there's a million different ways, and this is the beauty of Nostr. Like if you use something like Twitter, they can have a Web of Trust as well, but it's top down, and you accept whatever they give you, and you don't have any say. In this world, I mean, you can build Web of Trust through what you're talking about are sort of like implicit signals, things like, oh, I follow this profile, or it's weighted because I'm zapping this profile. You could also, if you wanted to have a client that calculated Web of Trust explicitly, that's fine too. You could like literally manually make a list. I think of like, these are the accounts I follow for this, like, maybe on the subject of Web of Trust, Fran is one of my top follows, but on the subject of, whatever, like what kind of food I want to eat tonight, then I'm going to go with this account that's like deep in recipes. And those are two really different worlds that have basically zero overlap. And that's fine too.
That's fascinating because, well, I'm going to expand a little bit more on Vertex because that's something I've been building with PWA. I mean, he's the brains behind the whole thing. He's a mathematician, and
He's a
knows.
mathematician. I read his piece about a year ago, which like half of it went over my head. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that was the point. Yeah, like, I got, oh man, like all these formulas, man. This
I
guy
know
knows
what
what
the
he's
fuck
talking
is
about.
this?
Uh, but over months of working with him, I can vouch for like it's not just cheap talk. It's he built like something, you know. I mean, we built something amazing, but I mean, I'm talking about him because he's the guy like doing the whole like the algos and the crawler and all that like kind of low level stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, and this is something we started building out of like, hey, we want like solutions, like real world solutions for web of trust, like because it's a concept, but how do you apply it? And as I was talking before, mostly it's about giving priority to stuff, right? So
Hmm.
one of our services, uh, one of our DVM services, is called sort authors. So essentially, what it does is like you just give it, let's say, comments under a post by Odell. Just to mention Odell because he normally gets a ton of comments, and so if you wanted to surface people who are closer to you when you're viewing that, right? What does it have to be like chronological, or what does it have to be like in whatever way clients are displaying it? But maybe you want to see that stuff. What if you're just searching for someone, right? You just
Right.
want to see it like according to your own view of the network. So that's why you just use these sort. Actually, the number we're talking about numbers doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you get a number in the response, but mostly it's just for sorting. You want to
Yeah.
show certain profiles or certain comments by profiles higher than others. You could apply this to something like um, I don't know, a TripAdvisor comes to mind, like some Setlantis, for example, where you just go and you have reviews, like a Google Map kind of stuff, right? You're gonna go
Yeah.
there,
Amazon, whatever.
Amazon, exactly. And it's no, I don't want to see like 500 reviews by randos. No, I want to prioritize this. How does this, is there anyone like remotely close to me that, that might know about the subject? So that's, I think, super powerful, especially for search and for weeding out like these impersonators and bots and
Bots.
spam and this, and they're gonna come in droves. So I think this is gonna be essential for every single service to have some sort. It doesn't have to be us, Vertex. What I mean is like, and that's why we built on DVMs, which are an interoperable standard, and we put out like this NIP, which is like
Yeah.
a spec for hopefully other players will come in and just offer their own services. But the idea is like, if we get clients to integrate that stuff, then that's gonna be a completely different experience, especially when Nostr gets bigger,
Yes.
and we get many more bots. And connecting, sorry, just connecting to what you were talking about, the whole content things and LLMs and stuff like, because what was your train of thought there? It was, yeah, you have connections which are weighted. They could be weighted by zaps,
Hmm.
but they could also be weighted by a certain content,
Totally.
right? Because someone is good at cooking, so you wanna, that person has more weight in this specific context. So that's where eventually this stuff is gonna get used by or connected to LLMs. So that's
Totally.
gonna be I think massive.
Interesting. So, okay, so I have a million questions for you on this. And for those of you who haven't seen this yet, Vertex, which Fran and Pip put out, it's incredible. And there's already some really nice first users, including Zapstore, including Pablo's projects, Ola. In fact, so my first question is actually just a logistical one, which is you guys dropped that about a month ago, right? Or like late Feb or early March?
Yeah.
Well, dude, I wonder. I forgot that was published as a DVM, and now we know at least two apps, probably more, that are using this, or your search engine too, which is sick, which we should talk about. I wonder. So the actor count on this DVM dash, again, it's not applying Web of Trust. Like Dusty, if you happen to listen to this, maybe you could integrate their Web of Trust API to do this. Or if not, you could build this, or Fran, or as an example, I wonder if you guys are the reason DVMs popped. It all popped about like February 28th. Would that make sense?
Well, that would be
There's
great
a
news.
decent chance it's you.
It could be. We
We're
did get.
figuring it out live. Forensics.
I love it. Also, I was not aware of this dashboard. It's great.
Yeah, it's
Um,
super useful.
mhm. Yeah, if it's
But
dusty, like yeah, we should get like some sort of like a web of trust layer on that stuff. But let's assume that the data is great and is pure signal. Um, yeah, we did notice like specifically on one of the endpoints that there were like a lot of queries. So I don't know
yeah,
exactly what was automated or what was the purpose um, of hitting on that because the the requests were a bit strange. So I mean, again, you need to
could be
tell.
spam.
Yeah, yeah,
Do,
yeah.
does your API, does it require payment or it's free right now?
Well, that's a great question because it's like something we are trying to figure out. Um, and it's we want to have like basically a freemium service. So
Okay.
there always will be like a free tier, and everyone should be able to access like you know with a certain granularity, um, like or a certain fidelity, right? You should get like a good idea of and whatever you are asking for. But if you want like to have like the up to the millisecond, updated like best personalized web of trust like data, then yeah, we'll see if we're trying to find out whether that is gonna be if you have like a certain like rate limit, you can do certain amounts of queries for free, and then if you want more you need to pay. But it's mostly focused on businesses and clients rather than on individual users because it's I mean, unless you just have one cashew wallet integrated or something like that, that you can make like a lot of payments like frictionless. It's just hard for the user to start using a service for basic UX improvement, right? For example, you want better search, and now all of a sudden you start paying, but you don't know how much you're gonna end up paying per month. You don't have like a real budget for stuff. So I mean, we're still exploring that stuff. If this is gonna be part of premium offerings by different clients, or they're gonna use it in just other ways that they can use the service to make sure that you know that an imposter is not, or bots are using the service for, for stuff they need to know. For example, if they're making like a marketing campaign and they just want to make sure that users are not taking advantage of certain benefit, there's many ways, but again, it's just like a exploration phase at the moment.
Totally. And to be clear, I mean, I think it's great that you've already got businesses integrating with it. But maybe the big user, as we talked about earlier, is actually it's going to be the bots, and you want the bots using it. You just want them paying too.
Okay.
You rate limit the bots. And to your point, I mean, I could see, so quickly. I think we all agree that one of the, or at least I think one of the things that's going to make Nostr pop is as LLMs and agents put more and more shit on the web, and there's already way too much to wade through. Like, I think what the key insight you've said so far, which really stuck with me, is the point of a Web of Trust or a Web of Trust API is to order what I would say then is the greatest market of all time, which is attention. Like the only really valuable thing that we have now is attention. And as the amount of information just goes infinite, it's already infinite, but times whatever, some huge order of magnitude more. We still as humans have very limited attention. And so you need some way to sort through all the noise to solve problems or entertain yourself. And the only way to do that is actually two ways. You either trust a third party. And if you don't want to trust a third party for, many reasons, I think it's becoming increasingly clear to people you don't want someone else cooking up what you're seeing and rewiring your own mind. Then you have to find some other way to sort that information. Ideally, you do it transparently, and ideally, you can equip your bots that are representative of you to use that information. So I could see something like this both for like custom feeds. Like I could see it being huge, and one of the reasons Nostr explodes on the bot side and the human side. The bots, because they want to go out there and get custom information. They're willing to pay for that to put into their own, recipes they're cooking up for things they show you. And then even for humans, like one thing I think would be super cool. I guess we sort of seen this like with the DVM algos, but like I would love it if I never have to log on to another social media client of any kind ever again. And like all I do is just get, whatever, like an email index, or just like once a day, it's like, hey, here are like five like things we think you would need to know about. It takes 5 minutes and there is no scrolling. Like that would be like a service I would happily pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. While you were describing this, I was thinking about like a slider, right? Where depending on the amount of attention you want to give to just what's happening, you could make it like tighter or looser. So, maybe you have more time and you want to be more open to just random stuff. Or sometimes you got like 2 minutes to catch up with, and then both in terms of like your connections and on the relevant content, you can get like, as you were saying, just like there were some like email services that would just send you a summary, right, of like what was going on, like something like that, something that compresses the information and just gives you like, the most signal for the amount of time that you want to get. And I'm super bullish on this technology to actually help the problems of technology that we always talk about, about like addiction and just like being glued to social media and so on. It's like, if you get these tools, then you can, like, now you have the power to basically just, you can still be, obviously just being dragged down by that, but more tools for measuring that is just something that will change. And I think in general there is this like move, right? I think like kind of a cultural shift towards like understanding that no, hey, I think we're gonna a bit overboard with the algorithms and so on. So a lot more people are conscious about this. Sure, but we got like, I think like on Primal and other, like, you got the algos and you can choose your algos and stuff like that. That's one way. How, which new algorithms can we create based on Web of Trust or not, or just, summaries of things that are not feeds. I think we got all the tools there to build this stuff. And like, if you want to still be connected but angle yourself,
Totally.
it's gonna totally be possible and very easy to do.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, I think to me, we talk, at least in Nosterland, a lot about algorithms, and that's great, and that's a great first step. But to me, it's also just like the form factor. It's like I really don't want any
Mm.
kind of scrolling. I just don't think that's a good or a healthy outcome for anyone. Like what I
Right.
do want is stuff that, I would like to be a lot more, let's say, willful, and like things I want to see more of in life. As an example, okay, I really want to go out and like do more interesting things in my city. Like I, really like music, and I want to make sure that I'm exploring weird new live bands that I might like that I probably wouldn't see. So please
Yeah.
make sure, like, something I want to see in my email digest or whatever it is like, daily, like, there are these kind of newsletters, but customized just for me. Like, I don't give, I don't care if some like whatever, you know, uh, synthy pop group is coming. I don't want to see that. But if it's like a interesting psychedelic rock show, it's like, please make sure that that's in my digest or flashed up for me to like, hey, and maybe you even like, I give my agent the sort of green light to say, whatever, you've got your $100 budget, like buy me like tickets to something interesting tonight. Don't tell me, I want to be surprised. You know me. There's so much cool stuff you can do that doesn't just involve sitting there and scrolling.
Yeah, man, it's just amplifying the signal, and this is the whole theme. I feel it's like just having the power, of just like weeding out the noise. There's it's a good thing that we got a lot of noise, or the potential for a lot of noise, because we're building the tools to get rid of it.
Exactly.
And by the way, something that is amazing about these open protocols is like, let's say that you, Max, didn't want to associate yourself with like psychedelic rock bands, but you just want to spin up a new npub for that stuff, right? And all of a sudden you get like as many personas as you want with different like interests and stuff. I mean, it's up to you to decide, how you want to do it.
Totally. And again, and then I can, potentially have my agent orchestrator that like I have different
Mhm.
NPubs for different parts of my personality that I don't have to associate with my, primary NPub if that's what I'm using. But I could still have my agent go out there and each of those operates DVMs or whatever, searching for interesting things for me. Anyways, I guess one of the other kind of principles I'm talking about there is like using this open flood of information to encourage me to do more things I want to do instead of like spending more time glued to a screen. Like I think if like yeah, if there's kind of like one litmus test for is this helping my life or hurting my life, it's like am I doing substantially more or less screen time? It's probably a good barometer. Okay, so you talked a lot about early use cases for Vertex. We need to figure out maybe as a follow up, we can post whenever the show drops an answer to the question: are you guys the reason DVMs are popping off? But maybe just tell me a little bit about some of the early use cases you're seeing. I've had tons of ideas for a say bot or not type API and lots of services that could use that. One place I've seen this is it impub.world, the search engine you guys built.
Yeah,
And that's using Vertex in the background.
exactly.
So for those of you who haven't played with this, I have to say I was extremely impressed. Obviously, I am a big fan of Primal and Artur and all the stuff he's built, Nostr.band. But like this is by far the fastest search I've seen on Nostr, by far. So this is a way to search profiles and you just immediately get a response, and it feels like centralized. First of all, how the hell did you guys get it so fast?
Well, thank you. And you know what's crazy? None of this is cached. Like,
How is that possible? It feels extremely cash.
exactly. The well, the images are cached. That's a little trick that's something I built that I'm pretty proud of because it just gets to feel that it's instant, and images are not loaded from their like or they're not loaded by the browser. So we preload the images on the server and we resize them on the fly and we cache those. So I'm talking about the profile pictures. So basically, when you get the response, you just get like one request. Where, for example, you go and search for Max Webster, then the response you're gonna get back, and you're gonna tap on your profile, and you see like reputable followers. All of this comes in one request from the server, and the Nostr request to Vertex is done server side. This is done server side, which is totally fine. This is a tool, and people can use it. It's open source, by the way, if you want to see how it's done. So you can integrate.
Sweet.
Obviously, Nostr can be used from any client. So if for your particular use case, server is better, like just use it from the server. If your users expect to have connections from the client, for example, you'd have integrated to, I don't know, Amethyst, let's say. I mean, obviously that's going to come from the client. Viter is not going to run a proxy for this stuff, which is perfectly fine. But for a site like this, what we want to show is like, this is hitting Vertex, and all the results that are coming in are real time.
Yeah.
And all the credit here goes to Pip, because he's the one that made that API like return so fast.
Sick. And are you guys okay? So your search engine, and the more we're talking, the more I'm thinking you've got to be the reason the DVMs are popping off. So you've got impub.world. It's being used now inside of Zapstore, and now I think Pablo he's using inside of Olas, which is like an Instagram clone on Nostr. Is that right?
I'm not sure. He posted something about he was playing with it, but I'm not really sure he
Hmm.
shipped.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, is on npub.words. That's
Hmm.
the one where it's being used, and
And
obviously
Zapstore too.
on Zapster. Yeah, that's been the first one. Um, so yeah, and talking about that, one of my main intentions for, let's gonna say, like this first part of the year is to get on Zapster like relay selection and
Mm,
DVM selection. So, no, for example,
cool.
if you have DVMs like hitting Vertex and you have another provider you wanna change it to, you're gonna be able to change the relay from there. And obviously for other stuff like whatever your DVMs may be, reproducible builds DVM or malware checking DVM, all this kind of stuff that I feel I've been talking
Sweet.
about for ages. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see it live. I want to see it coming.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, each of those could be its own marketplace of providers for each of those.
Oh yeah. That's the whole point of DVMs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super cool. Um, yeah, no, I mean, definitely kudos to you and kudos to Pip because it feels like magic, like just how fast. Like I'm shocked. It really feels as fast. It's the first search I've seen that feels as fast as like a centralized alternative. So it's incredibly impressive. I had a ton of ideas. Like immediately when I saw this, the first person I tagged was Oscar at Fountain because I know he had for the longest time had this idea of wanting to do like a giveaway or like, hey, I'll give you 1,000 sats if you listen to your first show on Fountain, which is awesome. Makes tons of sense to me. But the big challenge is like, bought or not? Well, how the hell do I know? I mean, I'm not just going to give 1,000 sats and get bled dry. But if I can say, well, this has a reputation of 85 out of 100 or something, or higher, or whatever that number is, like chances are it's probably not a bot. Great, I can do that. So I just see so many businesses that should be able to use this as well. And to me, it's like this is one of the missing just like core pieces of infrastructure I think we need for Nostr to go to the next level.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when I was mentioning before that use case where you have marketing budget and so on, I was thinking about Fountain, because that was one thing. Like, can they tell? If are they being gamed or not? Um, yeah, there's a bunch of other use cases. You could also think, yeah, maybe Bitcoin wallets as well. Like, could be, potentially, if you wanna, there's some, depending on how the channel is open. For example, with Lightning, like there's some trust involved, so you might want to know um, who you're dealing with, right? I mean, and that's, again, I'm gonna emphasize that this is completely, this is not top down, right? It's everything. Even though obviously Vertex is a service and is centralized in that sense. First of all, you can change providers, but then like the fact that I talked about PageRank, I think it didn't expand much on the other algorithm that Pip implemented, which is called personalized PageRank. And there you don't have like this kind of global state of what Vertex view of the network is, but it's like specifically your view. So in this case, depending who the source is, what source npub you're viewing the network as, then everything changes according to you. So that's the whole point, right? Like
Yeah.
in the case of Fountain, I don't know, maybe they can use Oscar's npub, for example, or I don't know, like uh, or any other npub, but some at some point that you feel is like a good starting point for determining like who's to be trusted and who you said bot or not, like maybe let's say spam or not,
Yeah.
because again you could have
The
well,
bot
not
might be paying me.
use case, but you also love your bots, right? So it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One question on the algorithm there. I think it's great that you're using PageRank. I mean, you don't necessarily need to reinvent every wheel. I was under the impression that PageRank was actually still under copyright. Did that recently roll back, or are you guys just kind of like YOLO right now?
No, I think it's out in the open. Like
Okay.
so many open source projects use it.
Mm,
That there's the few like graph databases that ship with it. No, the algorithm
okay.
is being published for a long time. I don't think that, and actually Google, I think they stopped using it, or
Yeah, they have their new version of it.
probably something newer, but it's just a tiny part, or just like a minor part of the equation of
Yeah.
all the things they consider. But again, this is because they've been playing in the legacy game, and yeah, they don't build on open protocols. So I feel like we have it simpler in that case, because they had to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what are y'all's plans now? I mean, you've got this beautiful API. Like, how do you continue to develop it out? Like, what are some of the new, I don't know, features or functionalities you want to add to it? Or is it kind of more about just finding other businesses to dog food it and, let it improve in the wild?
Yeah, it feels like it's about time of getting people to use it and give us feedback, and then take it from there.
Mhm.
But one of the things that interests me a lot is what I mentioned before about like integration with LLMs, because if you just mix the whole like web of trust thing with content, all of a sudden, like the conjunction of these two things is going to be massive. So I don't know what shape this will take. If it's LLMs like via MCP consuming Vertex services, or is it like somehow integrated in some other way, or is if it's Vertex that goes out to the LLM and just returns something. However that may be, it's something that definitely is interesting, because all of a sudden now you can answer the question that we've been debating so much in the NIP repository about, like, oh, we should produce this spec. They say now that you trust this person for car recommendations, or they know a lot about, like, no, man, I mean, just let the data speak by itself. If it's public data, which is my basic assumption, right, that all this is public data.
Right.
A whole new conversation is like, how do we make a lot of these things private? Can we do these things privately? Can we access private data, or can you supply private data in order to, like, leverage part of our services? I mean, too many cool things to explore. I'm sure there are.
Love it. Yeah.
But in terms of public data, yeah, just like just use the public data to get these recommendations.
And so, just so I understand this correctly, so part of the idea in the next phase is like trying to figure out basically how to not just necessarily have a global web of trust score, or even like a local first, but centralized, not centralized, but like general web of trust score, but have like tons of subcategories. And instead of trying to figure out explicitly what those categories are, you guys take the fire hose of data and try and like best come up with the potential categories and web of trust for each of those categories.
Yeah. I don't know if the categories should be like predefined, but it's simply that,
Or dynamic even.
just let the LLM do its job, right? And
Yeah.
it'll figure it out. Yeah.
Super cool. Beautiful. Dude, so I know we're kind of coming up on our time here. We've chatted about a lot of things. What else? Anything else I should chat? Oh, I mean, one thing, you've got a new podcast that we've mentioned a few times now, talking about the business opportunities that you see on Nostr. This is obviously, or Freedom Tech in general, something I think a ton about. What are some of your, you've been building sort of in the open now and open source projects, but are obviously thinking a bit more and potentially have some paths to monetize, which is great. What do you think? Kind of coming back to my first question with the state of Nostr, do you think it's still relatively a small GDP, let's say, but it's not nothing? I mean, there's definitely some Bitcoin getting zapped around. What are your best guesses as, when you start to see the first examples of services that are monetizing? I guess Primal is one example, but with some of the vanity stuff they were selling, or the premium subscriptions, have you seen other examples, or where do you think monetization goes next?
Well, I mean, part of the idea of starting the podcast, first of all, was to just a very selfish motive. It's just to get myself to do it better, because you know I had like zero practice. I did a few, and this is probably my third one.
All right, I'm
Uh,
honored.
oh, yeah. But I will say that you were the first one to invite me, and I declined. What was it, like a year and a half ago or so? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. But I guess it's an open exploration of what this means. What
Mhm.
what is freedom tech? Like, is it because when you talk about freedom tech, all of a sudden it's you're in tech, but you're not in any kind of tech. So there are some restrictions, like what you want to call like moral restrictions, or right. But there's like certain things that you don't want to do, like you don't want to, whether that's by principles or because you think it's the future, right? So I mean, lots of people have different opinions on that, but they're in it
Right.
for different things. So like, I don't know, it's just I would love to talk to people and learn about what they, how they see it. And but in essence, what I want to explore is the is how do we, is it like self-sustainable? Like, can you build like a small business, at least, um, keep yourself and your family afloat, and then ideally just make a great business out of it,
Hmm.
without like succumbing to like the traditional models. Like, one of the communities that I really respected for a long time is like the indie hackers.
Hmm.
And these people are, they're trying to find ways of like just building like small businesses, and again, this kind of ties into my whole idea for Zapstore, because I want to, let's say, empower devs that today maybe just need to have another job, but eventually I want them to be able to sustain themselves with their own passion projects or their own products. And so how do we get that with less friction? But in general, I'm open to, like, for example, a VPN service like that. One could classify as a freedom tech in a way, right? Or I don't know, certain like cloud services that that are alternatives to big tech. That they have their guidelines, and people prefer them for some reasons because they value more privacy. There's a lot of things to be kind of discussed around that.
Totally.
But it's basically, again, it's just I don't pretend to have the answers or whatever. Just or teach people anything. It's more just an ongoing inspiration.
Well, I mean, those in my experience are always the most fun podcasts when you're just having a truly open-ended conversation with someone that you already respect and are excited to talk to you, like this one. And it's like, well, no matter what ends up happening, if no one else listens, I already learned a lot, so it's already
I,
a
I
huge win.
I mention this because as much as the OpenSats and HRF and all the other organizations that give grants, which are amazing and are super important at this stage of things, which are
Yeah,
very small. Like, um, I'm interested in seeing, like, what is a world without them. They cannot fund
yeah,
everyone, right? Maybe they should focus on what we were talking before, like on lower level, on libraries and this kind of stuff, right? And ideally have the people who can more easily monetize, um, you know, uh, just try to do it.
totally.
And ideally, just if you want to contribute part of your revenue to OpenSats or HRF or whatever that may be, that will be another way of funding these projects as an alternative to the prison um, approach, right? So it's mostly about that. Like, how can you, if someone jumps into to this world, like, hey, can I make a living? I want to put my time and energy into this. It's all cool, but can I make a living off of it?
Totally. Uh, any final thoughts or any, I don't know, also, I guess, predictions you have for what's going to happen with Nostr this year? Are there any use cases or apps you think are going to explode, or things that if you weren't, already extremely hands full, that you would be playing with right now?
Oh man, no, I don't have any um, predictions. I'm super excited about the communities stuff that specifically Neil Lismans is working on, because I feel like we're just not good at that at the moment. Like having more community focused tools. So there's been a lot of discussion over the months, um, but it's not coming to. I don't know. I just don't see it in real projects, right? Live. I cannot use them right now. So there's lots of ideas, lots of discussion, lots of specs, but little to show for. And I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but I think yeah, what Neil is just going around with communities and all his designs, and that's something I really want to see in the world. It's going to take a few more months. But yeah, man, like chat-based stuff, like forums, relay-based kind of communities, and that's what we're really need to scale this stuff. Is like stop like the main feed, the Bitcoin talk and all that, and
Yeah.
memes, and just like if you want to talk about rugs, then you have not crypto rugs. I mean,
Yeah, I was about to say, maybe not the
what,
best example of this community.
well, that could be as well, right?
Hey, or Argentina, we haven't talked about that yet.
Oh man, so many things to talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, no, Argentina is not gonna. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I mean, in terms of like Bitcoin and so on, it's like the usage is so low that I don't see. I don't know. I don't see it changing anything, and I think the future, is the internet. Is the internet.
Yeah.
Like adoption will come through the internet, and it's not gonna come by orange pilling a few coffee shops.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think, I mean, increasingly, my mindset is not only is it going to come to the internet, but, if you really want to see people using Bitcoin as payments, you need to find something that they either can't get for anything else other than Bitcoin, or that using Bitcoin as payments or eCash or whatever enables an activity that's not possible otherwise. And so for me, my best guess is, in fact, I was just talking with him. Now that we have this new spot in San Francisco, Bob was here. You probably know Bob from, I forgot what he's calling his project now, but Prisms and
Yeah, yeah.
Boardwalk Cash. That's it. Also playing with eCash. But that, he always was talking about it's going to be one to many, like 1 to 1,000. And increasingly, I think that's going to be bots. I think it's going to be, Bitcoin is going to explode as a medium of payment, or backing a medium of payment from these situations where I need to, as a bot, make 1,000 different calls, and each of those has a payment associated with them at once. And there's just, you can only do that with something like an eCash or something like a Prism payment. So I don't know exactly how that's going to play, but my spidey sense tells me machine to machine, agent to agent payments is
All right.
that's where the really big thing is going to be.
Definitely, and I share that. I totally think that's gonna be the way again, possibly with human intervention in lots of cases, but that's totally fine. If these tools can get us like 5 times more productive, then that's great. It's fine that there's a human in some part of the dependency chain.
Totally. Awesome. Well, Fran, thank you so much, man. Like you said, it's been a long time coming. Glad we were able to make this happen. Hopefully, the next time we get to do it, in person. Maybe even Buenos Aires or here. Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be a real treat.
love to see. Yeah, and hopefully Nostr Buenos Aires later this year. That
Could
might
be
happen.
great.
They announced something. I think it might happen in November. So
All right. Well,
great
I'll keep my
opportunity.
eyes peeled.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you so much,
Beautiful.
Max.
All right, man.
All right. Bye bye.